Here I am literally sitting at breakfast with the guys who invented Silicon Valley and, getting imbibed with that kind of thing. The people with whom you meet and who you hang out, they dramatically impact, your life in all sorts of ways. If someone would have asked me then, what is the secret to success? I would have said there were two things. The two things are...
My guest for this episode is Paul Dunn. Paul is a 4-time TEDx speaker. He's a senior fellow in one of the world's leading think tanks, and he consults and mentors to leading edge businesses around the world. He's also the co-founder of an amazing organization called B1G1. Now, I first heard Paul speak about B1G1 back in 2017, and I was blown away by his passion and his energy. I'm thrilled to have him on the podcast to share his experience and to dig into ways that we can all make more impact in the world. If you enjoy what you hear, please leave a review, like, comment, and subscribe. It would mean the world to me and will help this podcast reach as many people as possible. You don't want to miss this. Enjoy. Paul, welcome to the show. My first question for you. In life, what is the most important thing that you've ever had to pitch for?
Oh, wow. That's a good opening question, isn't it? The most important thing I think I've ever had to pitch for was actually to be someone's mentor. No, seriously, this goes back to 2007. And Masami Sato, as you know, she's nice enough to call me the co-founder of B1G1. She was telling me about the idea, and I said, "Oh my God, that's awesome!" And at the end of it, I said, "Masami, this is so cool. I want to be your mentor for the rest of your life. Would that be okay?" And she said, "No." Which seriously, because she felt that I didn't get it. So 24 hours later, she had made a movie for me, a very interesting little movie, about 2 minutes long, which she said, "Let's have a cup of coffee and I'll play you this movie." And so she played me the movie, and it's an amazing movie. I'll show it you one day. And the tears are rolling down my face with the basic idea of B1G1, which is all about, wouldn't it be great if every time something good happened in business, something great happened in the world, right? That's the basic idea. And so after this 2-minute video, which she forced me to watch, she said, "Ask me mentor question again." And I said, "What? The one I asked you yesterday?" She said, "Yes." So I said, "Masami, I'd love to be your mentor for the rest of your life. Would that be okay?" And she said, "Now it is, because you really get it now." So
isn't that interesting? So actually, she pitched you, not the other way around.
Well, sort of thing, yes. But then again, I think that often happens with pitching, doesn't it? I mean, pitching is such an interesting thing, and in a sense, I mean, when I was when you kindly invited me, I was thinking, gosh, the title "Life's a Pitch" is absolutely true, isn't it? I mean, everything we're doing, we're in some way, shape, or form trying to enroll others in an idea that we have. Yeah. So yeah, it's a great title, and I'm very happy to be here.
It's great to have you with me. If that's the one that's kind of the most memorable or the most important, as you think back through your life and your career, are there any that got away? Are there things that you think, "Oh, I'd love to have gone down that avenue or walked in those shoes for a little while"?
Not well. It's interesting you ask that question, because classically, the entrepreneurial journey is supposed to be kind of like the hero's journey, in the sense that you have the dark night of the soul, and and all of those sorts of things. And I occasionally I have that, but I just think that my life has been one of incredible luck. And I can't think of a time when there was something that I really wanted to do that involved others that I actually couldn't do, and that goes back to, when I got hired from the United Kingdom. I was born in Dover. Here I am in Tokyo tonight, but and then I got hired to go to Australia and be one of the first 10 in Hewlett-Packard. I mean, how lucky can you be? Right? You're sitting down, you're 21 years old, and you're meeting with Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard, and all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I look back on life now, and well, not just now. I think that I'm always curious as to what could be and what sort of new things can we do, and so on and so forth. But I can't think of a time off the top of my head when there was something that I really wanted to do but couldn't do because I couldn't involve someone else in the process. Yeah. It's
interesting. You used the word lucky there, and I'd love you to expand on that, because I find there's tension around that word. Is luck something that you're given, or is luck something that you create?
That's a great question. I suspect that it is something you create, right? And one of the things that I think helps you create that is to be curious. I mentioned the word curious as well. And, I find myself consistently curious, like as to, how does that work? How would that work if? How would this, why, all of those sorts of things come up. And it makes me almost like overly interested in what the other people are thinking and doing and saying. And somehow or other that kind of works to my advantage. Not that I'm thinking of it that way. It's just that I am genuinely curious.
That's fascinating. I think with curiosity, there comes an element of presence as well. You say,
yes,
listening to what other people are saying, being engaged in the moment, so that you aren't necessarily lost in the future or in the past. You're really kind of there in that point of creation.
Yeah. And the other thing around with that, I'm very, again, on this luck thing. I was in an event. It wasn't one I was speaking at. I was actually in this event with a friend of mine, and which was great. It was about 6 months ago, and we were working in pairs. And the guy that I was working with, he had to leave, and so I got to work with another guy. And this guy's name is Aaron, and Aaron's 22 years old. And he's a guy who's been through life. He went through school in a very difficult way and was in all sorts of trouble, and sort of went to a program run by a friend of mine 8 years before this meeting.
Oh, wow.
And so anyway, we're in the meeting and something came up, and I said, so Aaron, what's your take on that? Have a listen to this. He said, my take on it is, Paul, that my life gets easier when I realize that life comes from me, not me. And I thought, whoa, that is so cool, right? That is just so cool. And that's part of it, I think, that, I just get very lucky to be in those kind of situations and hear those things and experience those things.
There's an energy that comes to that, or comes with that, I think.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating.
That is true. That is very true. Yeah. It's, and again, it's like when you think about what Aaron said, life comes from me, not at me, then we can bring that energy to so many things, which effectively changes what could have been a bad outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul,
you do that. By the way, you do that. You're a master of it.
Taking small steps. You're an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, 4 times TEDx speaker, sought after business mentor. And as you mentioned, you're the co-founder of B1G1, and we'll talk more about that later on in the episode. But what's your story? So I didn't know that you grew up in Dover. As a kid, what did you want to be? Have you always had that kind of entrepreneurial spark?
As a kid, now remember, as a kid is a long time ago, right? For me, I don't think we had color TV way back then. I think we just had TV. But I was always interested in. It was this new thing, relatively new, when I was a kid, in a mining village. My dad was a miner, and he vowed I would never go down the mine, which I never have done. But I was fascinated by how all these new things worked, and so I then was lucky enough to go to college in London, study in London, and I studied electronics engineering and stuff like that. And then that got me the entree, if you like, into Hewlett Packard, which then, I mean, he just picture this, if you would. Here I am literally sitting at breakfast with the guys who invented Silicon Valley, as in, Dave and Bill, and, getting imbibed with that kind of thing. And it's that whole saying that the people with whom you meet and who you hang out, they dramatically impact, your life in all sorts of ways. That connection leads to another connection, leads to another connection. And as a result of that, I formed one of Australia's first computer companies. Would you believe it, Dominic? I'm actually in the Australian Computer Museum. Having done that. Seriously, my big claim to fame. And then, and I'm not sure whether this is the same as your journey, but one day I went to an event, a seminar. This person said they were in Brisbane in Australia, and the Brisbane, Australia can be a bit, how shall I say, a bit gangstery in some ways. And this person said, I want you to come to this seminar. We didn't know what seminars were in those days. And I said, what on earth would I want to do that? I've got 150 people. We're doing $23 million a year. This was way back in 1980. And why would I want to do that? And the person said, seriously, she said, I'll rip your bloody arms off if you don't come. Seriously. I remember that. That was a good pitch, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I went, and it was James Rohn. And here I was sitting in this audience with 600 other people. And if you've ever heard or seen Rohn speak, he's very static. He's turning the pages as he speaks. But I remember hanging on every word. And later that, Rohn said, keep a journal, which I do now every day, right? And he also talked about taking action. And so that night I rang up my colleagues in the computer company, and I said, guess what? As a result of where I was today, I'm no longer in the computer company.
Oh, wow.
And they said, could you give us a little more warning? So I said, okay. So, and so then, I think 4 months later, I remember it was April the 1st, actually, I created a company called Results Corporation, and was very lucky to, there's that word again, we built that where we were doing all of the marketing and training and all that kind of stuff for 23,000 small to medium scale businesses. And, wow. with all of the joy that brought, and at the same time, working with organizations like ICL, like Qantas and people like that. And so that was the start of that journey, if you like, of having the privilege that you and I have as being, on stages or on microphones or however, virtually these days, and literally influencing the lives of the people that we are privileged to be talking with. And I think that's, when I think about it, I find it very hard to think about what could be better than that. Seriously, what could be better than that? And there's all sorts of learnings in that as well. Can I share one with you?
Please do.
Might be useful. Yeah. So, this friend of mine, when I started all of this, he said to me, do you ever get butterflies? And I said, oh yeah, I really get butterflies. And he said, that's great. He said, that's great. And I said, oh, really? Why is that great? He said, well, the trick is you've got to get the butterflies because that gets certain things going in your body. But he says the trick is to get the butterflies flying in formation. I loved that line.
Lovely.
So he said, how do you do that? And he said, well, you have something that you say, before you get on to it, you say something. And so I was pretty simple. And I had, here's what I said for years. I said, for them, someone would be introducing me and I'd be at the back of the room as you are and entering from the left and all that sort of stuff. And I would find a shiny surface. It could be the back of a spoon or something like, or a mirror or a window. And I would simply say to it, for them, for them, for them, for them, for them. the idea was that would get it off me and onto them. But then I saw a video, though I remember this rainy day in Singapore, and I saw this video that was produced by some Nordic country. I can't remember the country, but it was all about diversity. And that day, which was about 6 years ago, I changed up what I was saying, and it's changed everything. See, one of the things that I think is really important is the power of words in terms of how we pitch and everything else. And so I changed it because I realized that when I said for them, that I had terrific intent, but it was putting a barrier right between us just by saying for them as if we're different. So that day, to no surprise to you, I'm sure, I changed it, and it was for us, for us, for us, and has been ever since. And that gives you that all-important connection.
I love that.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's really
sort of going
powerful.
in the background and bang, and away you go. And it's it mostly works. So. Well, it always works, actually. I shouldn't say mostly; it always does.
Forgive me, but I'm going to steal that one if that's okay.
Oh, go. Please go. No, please go.
So you've talked there about that kind of idea of standing up on stage and, having the butterflies. In those early days, how important was your ability to speak and to pitch in order to kind of generate that success?
Oh, I think it was total, really. You could not have done it if you didn't have the right intention. Mm-hmm. And the right intention, of course, was that it's not about you. It's about something bigger than you that's happening in the space between you or with you and the audience. And so together, well, you know what happens, right? You're doing things, and you may have sort of quote unquote rehearse some kind of we don't rehearse, but you may have some kind of line in your head, and then you're there and you're in the moment, and all of a sudden you say something and you go, I'm sure you do this, you go, oh my God, where did that come from?
That was good.
Where did that come from? So it's an incredible environment to have the privilege to be a part of. It really is.
Did you have to learn some of those skills, or did you see those skills develop, or do you just think it was something that you kind of innately had?
Well, I think the answer to that is that I'm still learning that, right? So I don't think you ever get it, to the ultimate thing. There's always something there that keeps you going. But no, I think I was just I just got very fortunate that the people that I was around had a vested interest in making sure it was great. The client's got a vested interest because they're paying you, right? So they've got a vested interest. So no, I don't think, and I think we're our worst critics. You go, oh God, I could have done that in a different way, but you forget sometimes that the people there didn't even notice that that you said that. So. And I think it's an incredible calling, to be able to get. I mean, even if there's only 3 people in the audience, I've never had that, but it's would you do it for 3 people? Of course you would. Of course you would, right? And you'd equally do it for 3,000. It's because you're there influencing their life in some way, and what better thing could there be than being able to do that?
I've seen you speak several times now, Paul, and you're brilliant at telling stories and grabbing an audience's attention. Have you got some tips for our listeners on how to find stories or bring your stories to life? Because I think we all have them, but people sometimes just don't notice them.
That's a great question. I think for me, one of the keys, well, it goes back to that curiosity thing. If you're, you can't fail to notice something. Just today, as a for example, I had occasion to go back to something that I did in 2018, I was looking for something, and instead of finding the thing that I did find the thing that I was trying to find. I also found this, which was a headline that I happened to see when I went in to grab a cup of coffee. And, there was someone had left a newspaper. I don't read them, but there was a newspaper there on the table. And right on the top of the newspaper had this little thing, and it said, we have not inherited our world from our forefathers. We're borrowing it from our children. I thought, and so in that becomes a story, right? Like I went to this cafe, and this is what happened. So I think if you're listening out and looking out for those stories, if you're present, and you're not there looking for stories. You're there to be present, and as a result, all of the stories kind of flow. But thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it.
Do you capture them? Do you write? You said you went back and you found that, so you've obviously got some sort of storage system for these. Yeah,
my storage system is Keynote files.
Right.
I come in, pop it in, and then you try and find the slide and all of that sort of thing. But you can. It's amazing how you can relive those moments. You remember exactly what was happening and so on. It really is amazing.
But it is that, and you did it just then as you told that story. It's about creating, I think, that kind of imaginative context. So
yes,
I can see you seeing that headline.
Yes, exactly.
I know the fact that that's not something that you normally see, but there's some papers lying on the coffee table or on the desk, and you will. And so, as I imagine that, I am drawn into the narrative, and I think that's something that a lot of people miss. They kind of head straight for the punchline the kind of takeaway, rather than creating that space for the audience to come with you on that journey.
And I think it's a really interesting point too, because in a sense, when you're pitching, quote unquote pitching, you're telling stories, right? You're involving others in those stories. And I remember, let's see, when was it exactly? 5 years ago, a friend of mine, her name is Bernadette Jiwa, and she sent me an email, but I imagine she sent a lot of other people the same email, but the subject line absolutely got me. And it said this, here's the subject line. It said, "The storyteller is the most powerful person in the world." Now, I didn't get turned on by the power thing, but then she explained in the body copy of the email that Steve Jobs said that in 1996 when he was at Pixar, but that was not all he said. What he said after that opening line was really the crux to it. And he said this, he said, "The storyteller," this is why stories are so good, right? He said, "The storyteller sets the vision, the values, and the agenda for an entire generation yet to come." Now, when you think about that, right, the storyteller sets the vision, the values, and the agenda for an entire generation yet to come. Now, let's say that, for example, there's someone listening to us now who happens to, I don't know, sell some sort of computer stuff or what doesn't matter what it is. And what I'm talking about here is not you telling stories. Although that's important, what I would like us all to realize is that our power comes from creating stories, and then for creating stories for the people, better stories for the people that we're privileged to serve. Does that make sense? And then once you get, the storytellers, that's the vision, the values, and the agenda for an entire generation yet to come, you realize something else, which is really important. And you realize it's not about you. It's about something much bigger than you. And when that drives everything that, I'm not saying drive is probably the wrong word. When you imbue yourself, if that's the right word, into that kind of framework, things just flow in an extraordinary way.
Sorry to interrupt, but before we continue with the episode, I've got a favour to ask. I'm on a mission to get this podcast in the hands of as many people as possible. So if you've found what you've heard so far valuable, please, please, please like, comment, rate and subscribe. These things make a huge difference to our reach. And if you're open to it, if you happen to know just one person, someone who, just like you, would benefit from listening to these conversations, then please share the podcast with them. Let's get on with it. You said in one of your TED Talks that we shouldn't be focusing on business plans or proposals, but focusing on this idea of kind of wowing our audience. And I think there's a parallel there in what we've just spoken about. Can you expand on that kind of philosophy a little bit more? Like, what is the benefit of that approach? Because so many people are focused on the detail and getting the numbers right and getting the spreadsheet sorted.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting you mentioned that, because one of the reasons I was going back, funny thing, to that 2018 program that I did was when, at that time, by the way, so I did a session, it was in Bali. And there were about 400 people. And I didn't even know I was going to do this session. Someone said to me, "Oh, you're here. Can you open the thing?" Oh, God. And anyway, I finished. And fortunately, well, no, there was a standing ovation, and it was kind of very lovely. And I exited the stage and started to walk down the aisle to go to the back of the room. And there's this huge guy, turned out to be a Canadian guy. And he's blocking my way and in the aisle. And he said in a Canadian accent, which I can't do, he said, "Oh my God, that was amazing." He said, "I am one of the world's biggest brand consultants, and you need a brand. And I'm going to give you that brand right now, completely free." And he said, seriously, he said, "As of now, you are the Wizard of Wow." That's what he said. And I'm not kidding you. And I went to the back of the room and I said to my friends, "Hey, this guy just said, I should be the Wizard. What do you think?" "Oh yeah, give it a whirl." So I gave it a whirl, and it sort of fitted, but there was something about it. I didn't know what it was, but there was something about it that was not exactly right. And then one day I was up on the Barrier Reef doing just a name drop, doing a session. And I'm not sure whether this ever happened to you, but I was sitting in the room, getting the presentation right the next day, and I was scheduled to speak with Vern Harnish was on the same stage and so on, And so it was a pretty important day. And I looked at the slides and I went, "Oh God, I can't do this. I cannot do this." And fortunately, a friend of mine, Michael Sheargold, was in a room next door, and I called him up. I said, "Michael, have you had dinner?" He said, "No." I said, "Look, come and have dinner with me." And he said, "What's the problem, PD?" And I said, I can't do this thing. And he said, "Show me the slides." Well, not surprisingly, pretty much every slide had the word "wow" on it. So he got to the first one, and he said, "Delete it." And I said, "Michael, there is a function that says you can just hide it. Do you want me to?" So he had me delete all of these slides. So I'm just slideless, as it were. And I had to think of something else. And then, which I did. And the session was really, really magical. And then I spoke with a very dear friend of mine, Simon Bowen. Some people listening may know Simon. He runs a company called The Models Method. And he and I have been friends for quite a long time. He's very sageful, is Simon. And he explained it to me this way. And he said, "You know what? Wow is kind of important." But he said, "O," meaning 08, is more powerful. And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, wow can be cosmetic. Right? But when you get someone going, that's the thing you want to go for." But the Wizard of O didn't seem to make much sense. But the O make sense. But maybe sometimes what I do is I sort of get into a wow to get to the if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, definitely. So let's talk about this idea of impact and purpose, because obviously that's a big part of what you do now with B1G1. Rather than me butchering it, can I put you on the spot here for a mini pitch?
Sure.
In sort of 60 seconds, what does B1G1 do, and why does it matter?
Okay. Well, you know how most people say that they're, going to do something great in life, but they really do, right? Something gets in the way. So, a way of describing it is what we do at B1G1. Oh, excuse me. Is we help people who own businesses become real businesses for good, so that they are creating high impact cultures. They're creating high impact branding. They're creating high impact engagement with their team and high impact connections. And they're doing that inexpensively and effortlessly. And that's kind of, well, it's not what I do. It is what we do. And in fact, just yesterday, actually, we crossed 365 million impacts.
Wow.
Which
that's
we
amazing.
Never could have imagined when we started this. So it's this simple idea which says, wouldn't it be great if every time something good happened in business, something great happened in the world as well? And I'm very pleased that so many people continue to get that and continue to get that. Businesses. I was talking to someone yesterday about, what's going on in the world and governments and all that sort of stuff. And we were reflecting that we frequently think that governments make the difference in the world. Well, I think they influence it, but really it's businesses that actually make the difference. And so when businesses, well, I'll give you a very simple example. We were at a business in Sydney the other week, and they are called Team Medical Supplies. And what they do is they supply doctors and doctors' surgeries with all sorts of things. And one of the things they showed me was they have like a storeroom, huge storeroom actually, store with, all of the forklift trucks going around and picking things off the thing. And they showed me how when the forklift driver actually picks something off, it actually gets electronically registered. And then they create impacts based on every single one of those things. And I thought, oh, God, that's amazing. And then I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if Amazon did that? Think about that. If every single parcel, did that, then it would be pretty interesting. And frequently, we talk about this whole idea of the power of small, tiny things, right? The power of small. But recently, Masami was saying something, and she said something about sustainability. And she said, if you think about sustainability, you have to, you can't do it on your own. You have to elevate everybody, right? And she said, and so really what you need to do is to make sure that the power of small becomes the power of all, which I think is a lovely phrase, so that we kind of get that together, we really can do some amazing things.
Yeah. It's such a simple idea and so powerful. I mean, we've been
you're pretty damn good at it
for the last for the last 4 or so years now, I think. And interestingly, when I originally heard you speak, I loved the idea, and it wasn't quite the right time for us to sign up for the platform and to do everything in that way. And I thought, you know what, I'd like to buy one, give one. We'd like to run workshops in primary schools. And so we went for that as a business, and found it so difficult and so time consuming. And it became a whole nother bit, having to employ people to look after that side of the business, taking us away from that kind of core focus. So when we came back to B1G1 and we were able to, instantly say someone has bought a training course, we're going to put a child in Kenya through school for a month, or I'm giving a speech. Let's, give 365 meals to kids in Ukraine. It's just wonderful to be able to make that sort of impact without the kind of barriers that sometimes stop us taking that action. And I think that's what you've done so powerfully.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
What do you say to people who are kind of thinking about, moving into that space and wanting their business or their employer to have more impact? Like, what's the first step that people should take?
The first step is to recognize that we are in now a very, very interesting time, right? Very interesting time. And there's, as is always the case, there's never been a time like it. And so what I think businesses need to do, there's this thing about businesses, which I'm sure you've heard of, about the sea of sameness, right? We're all playing in this sea of sameness, where it gets harder to differentiate. And it's now even harder. Why? Because we're all using the same tools. And what we tend to think about in business is that it's actually the tools, right? It's not. It's you. It's you and me. And so what we have to do is essentially be bigger, but not necessarily bigger ourselves, but do things that are bigger than ourselves, than each other. And when you do that, it's amazing. It's like instead of having to go out and pitch, which you still have to do, by the way, but instead of having to do that, what happens is you just create more attraction because you have instantly become bigger than you are, because you're doing things outside of you that actually make a difference. So yeah, it's not, I think more and more people are getting it. And thank goodness, because we need more and more people, to get it, to make the difference that still needs to be made. I mean, it's amazing,
Absolutely.
I was just on a little event where, as a result of everybody being there, some kids got access to water, and we think, oh, kids got access to water. Yes, they did. And there are 730 million of them who still don't have that.
Wow.
Right? So it's like, so there's so much more that we can do. And it's also like, creating or, like, for example, why would I, when you invited me, your team members did, and so why would I say, it's 9:00 in the evening here in Tokyo? Why would I say that? Answer the question, because it's fantastic to hang out with you. It's fantastic to hang out with you. But just think about, I could be doing, some other weird thing, whatever that is, but it wouldn't be as fantastic as hanging out with you. And not only am I hanging out with you, but people are listening to this.
Yeah, we're hanging out
as a result of that, they're getting some insights that will make a difference to them and to the people they meet. So that's why, this particular podcast is just so important. Really
Thanks,
is.
Paul. I think if you think about those kind of great ideas that we have, and I would say most people have good ideas on a regular basis. They might not follow through on them, but we kind of think, oh, I see a problem. What if we did something about that?
Yeah.
I see an opportunity. I wonder what it'd be like to take the first step. What tends to stop people moving forward is that they kind of see that initial obstacle and they can't push through
That's
it,
right.
or they can't see the way around it. Now, I'm sure as you were setting up B1G1, there's a real purity to the idea, but that doesn't mean that it was just easy. So what were the kind of main obstacles that you had to overcome in order to turn it into the movement that it is now with, 350 million impacts?
Yeah. So, well, I think sadly there were some things that still exist, which come from this whole element of trust or lack thereof. For example, in Australia, same thing is true in the United Kingdom actually as well. There are a couple of studies which suggest that whilst you and I, for example, and hopefully the people listening to us, will feel warm about, for example, the giving to charity, right?
Yeah.
Now, we don't use that word, as you know, very often. And here's why. Because sadly, 70% of people don't feel warm about that word. Why? Because they were ripped off in some way, or their neighbor was, or they watched a panorama program in the United Kingdom, or they read the Sunday newspaper, which said, someone ran off with the money. And that was one of the reasons why V1G1 is, why did it take 3 years to kind of go, okay, we're ready now? Because you had to solve that issue. You had to say, no, in V1G1, it's very different. The projects that apply to V1G1 have to go through this, depends, 12 to 18 week audit. We audit back for 3 years. We get them to do things. We call them in the middle of the night and see what happens on the phone. And then if they get through that process, then the independent board of B1G1 gets to review all of that. And they're pretty tough. I wish they weren't in some ways, but on the other hand, I'm glad that they are, because they reject something like, well, it's not something like, it is 7 to 9 out of 10 who apply every quarter. That's huge. By the way, they don't say go away. They say, by the way, if you fix that, then, we think you may be able to become a B1G1 project. So that's one of the toughest things, I think, that there's this, someone's ripping somebody off somewhere, that just goes on. And sometimes you have to work really, really hard to convince people of that. But what's really interesting, I'm not sure whether you talk about, life as a pitch. There are some times, aren't there, where it doesn't matter how you're describing it. They're so entrenched that it just, and you have to go, well, okay, sometimes next week, maybe whenever it is, maybe we'll get to meet again. But you also have to understand where they're coming from as well, because their circumstances are quite different than yours.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? I think you're not going to convince everyone, but that doesn't mean that's a negative in many respects. There's so much you can learn from that process. And as you say, you've always got that opportunity to come back and have another go in the future.
You have. And by the way, I'm very impressed. I'm not sure whether everybody can see what I can see, but I'm very impressed that behind your left ear is a thing that says impact. Look at that. It's really cool.
There you go.
And actually on the top there.
We're both there you go.
Surrounded by it.
Paul, it's been fabulous talking to you, and I could carry this conversation on forever, but it's very late with you, so I'm going to wrap things up with a final question. If you could go back and give that young miner's son one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, wow. That's a toughie. Let me think. Okay. I think it would be this. Someone asked me, one of the team asked me yesterday to write a blog, which wasn't about that, but it's kind of close to it. And it was like, what are the learnings? And, way back then, still lucky, back in those days, if you'd have asked me then and said, so Paul, here you are on this entrepreneurial journey, and you're lucky you're at Hewlett Packard, blah, 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 all of that, the computer company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If someone would have asked me then, what is the secret to success? I would have said there were two things. I would have said, the two things are to be able to deliver extraordinary value to the people that you're privileged to serve. That's number one, always will be. And then I said the second one would be to have fun doing it, right? And that's really important. But what I realized that when I met Masami and she said no to me first time was there was something else, right? And it's that whole thing that it's something bigger than you without you being bigger, if that makes sense. And so I think if I would have gotten that earlier, it might have been a smoother journey along the way. But I mean, it's just been incredibly smooth and continues so to be. And by the way, just recently we were back in London, and I went to the little village where I was born.
Oh, amazing!
It was. And what is so interesting when you do that is, or at least it was for me, you realize that there was this tiny little village, and that was your entire world. That was it. Right? And now, I mean, it's like, oh my goodness! So it's quite a change, and to have been able to go and continue to go on that journey and still learn as we go, and you know, meeting with people like you, quite seriously. I mean, this itself is a learning experience, you know, because I know how good you are at what you do, and so it's a great privilege to have been able to take some time with you. So thank you for making that available. And by the way,
My
for
pleasure.
those of you listening to this, thank you for doing that wherever you are as well.
Absolutely. Paul, thank you so much for taking time to join me on the podcast.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thanks for listening to the Why Life's a Pitch podcast. If you'd like to improve the way you pitch and communicate, I'm giving away a special gift to all my listeners. We've developed the Pitching with Impact scorecard to help you benchmark your pitch performance in 6 key areas. It'll take you less than 5 minutes to complete, and you'll receive a detailed, personalized report packed full of insights and ideas to help you improve and grow. Just head over to dominiccolenso.com/scorecard to get started.